Now I've thrown on the daily, this is where it gets more important. So one of the first steps to do on the daily is kind of tighten up those weekly zones that you drew on. So what I'd do here is I would actually make that weekly zone what we call the previous week's high zone. So what you need to draw on the daily, first of all, is the previous week's high and low zone. So it's pretty much, as I'll show you right now, just the space up here. So the high zone for the previous week was that right there. So that was the previous week's high. Now, another note I'll make is psychological numbers, which is pretty much just round numbers. They make your zones stronger. It's not an indication to buy or sell a psychological number, but it does make your zone stronger, whatever it is. So if I draw that on there, you can see that the psychological number of 144 dead was also the previous week's high zone. So we wouldn't really want to be holding a trade past this point right here. So that is the previous week's high and 144 dead. What is the previous week's low? So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So the previous week's low is, if I draw it on, this right there. So this is also a zone which we could look for rejections off, which, as you'll see right now, is what is happening. So firstly, on the daily, draw on the previous week's high and low zone, which is just the difference between the highest point. So for the previous week's high, the highest point the daily candles closed at to the highest point it reached. And then the low is the lowest point the daily closed at and the lowest point it reached. So we now have these two zones on. Also on the daily, you can get a few other zones on, but it will usually always be your previous week's high and low. So say price was, I don't know, tapping into here, that could be a potential zone, but it's pretty obvious like that. So what you need to focus on the daily, previous week's high and low, and then there may be some other potential daily zones somewhere. Now, the next step on the daily is, what are the daily candles actually doing? This will tell you a lot, and it's very important. So the actual anatomy of the daily candles is going to help with your bias. What you can see is that Monday and Tuesday, these two candles have dipped below the previous weekly low and then come back up. The first one was a weak bearish, and then the second one was a bullish candle. So as you can see, if I break it down, price tapped into what the 144 zone, was then a strong rejection. There was strong bearish candles coming to the downside, so a strong push, a strong push. The bodies then started to get weaker. So it was a weaker body there as a wick was starting to be created to the bottom. And then on Monday, there was a weak bearish body that is very weak compared to the push down. And both these two candles wicked down and then came back up. So we can safely say that we are rejecting the previous weekly low zone, because the daily candles are telling us that, because they both dipped below and then came back up. So knowing on the daily that we are rejecting the previous weekly low zone, we can now say we are starting to expect the next push to the upside like this. So we can get a push from here up like that. So we can say that because of what we're seeing on the daily, but yet that is not enough confirmation. This is where the next step comes in.